right, folks, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us for our panel that is going to feature our independent curriculum. We are doing an encore presentation of last week's panel where we began this conversation about academic design, and we're so excited to continue the program tonight with some very special guests, including some folks that you saw last week, including myself, Cheryl Shank-Miller, the Director of Enrollment Management at Eastside Prep, but we are going to be joined by a couple of new folks, one student and one alumna of Eastside Prep. So I'm going to take the opportunity to introduce you to everyone that we have here this evening. And we will go in the order that you see on your screen. So first of all, Eliana, would you please introduce yourself? Tell us when you graduated from Eastside Prep and where you are now in the world, where you're calling in from tonight.
All right, hello everyone. My name is Eliana Swai. I was a part of the class of 2021, so I graduated last year, and I'm currently a freshman at Swarthmore College near Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Woohoo! So you had the opportunity to start college in person this year. Is that correct, Eliana?
Yes, I'm currently sitting in my dorm room, a little bit too small, but I think that's the full college experience, right?
That sounds like the full college experience. So we're so grateful that you could join us, and hopefully this time frame as a student in the college on the East Coast works well for everything that you've had before you today. And I'm sure we'll hear more about that as the evening goes on. But before we get to that, it would be great to introduce everyone to Aiza. Aiza, how are you this evening?
I'm doing great. I'm Ayezah. I'm a senior this year, graduating in hopefully in June, class of 2022, and I'm very excited to be here.
Yay, Aiza, we are glad that you are here. We are also joined by Matt Delaney, our Director of Academic Design and Integration, and Matt is in full color this evening, not joining us from his automobile. Matt, how are you?
I'm doing well, Cheryl. Thanks for having all of us again. I am actually sitting, the background I have on tonight is in the amphitheater in our Macaluso Academic Collaborative. And when we are not in pandemic times, this is the venue we use for students to share their final independent study presentations and their senior thesis presentations. I am so lucky. I'm just a little bit into my 15th year at Eastside Prep, and I facilitate our upper school independent curriculum program. And I have the pleasure of working with a lot of amazing students, and in particular, and you'll hear more about this tonight, the two strong, high bandwidth, world-changing young women who just introduced themselves. So I'm excited to be here and just revel in the opportunity to support students as they pursue what they're interested in, as they direct their own learning.
Well, we are excited to hear more about their experiences as well as your insights from the academics perspective of Eastside Prep, Mr. Delaney. So thank you for being here. And I want to give a special thanks to our admissions event coordinator, Meg Blyler, who is behind the scenes this evening and also was part of our panel on the 21st, producing that event. So Meg, thank you so much for being here and for organizing everything that is going on tonight. We really appreciate you. So without further ado, I would love to get us kicked off with the invitation to ask you all to ask us questions. So you will find a live event Q&A that is available, a chat function that is available for you to be able to ask us questions. So as we go through this evening's presentation, we're hopeful that you will contribute the things that you're thinking about and wondering about when it comes to the academic experience at Eastside Prep. So please take the opportunity to share any and all questions that you have, and we'll take the opportunity to answer them. All of these panels are unscripted events. These are not things that we prepare remarks for in the sense of what has been happening in the life of our students and our school community. But we did think that because of our focus on the independent curriculum tonight, it would be great to give you a little bit of background on what the independent curriculum is at Eastside Prep, as well as to feature specifically the students who, the student and alum who are here, the experiences that they've had within the independent curriculum. So what I'm going to do now is actually toggle to a visual of some of the independent curriculum experiences that our students had. And Mr. Delaney, I'm hoping you can unpack some of this terminology for us a little bit. So when we see independent study, upper school or US seminars, US meaning upper school seminars, and our senior thesis experiences, what do those mean? What are those terms all about? When can students access those experiences? So before we even get into the meat of what these students have accomplished, can you please share with us a little bit about what these opportunities are broadly at Eastside Prep?
Okay, I will start with our upper school seminar program. We're actually running 31 distinct topic seminars this year, and these happen and are nested in the middle of each of our 3 academic trimesters. We nest them in the middle so that they are so that students are able to focus on the start of their trimester long classes and then ramp down at the end of those classes. Generally, seminars are run by 1 to 2 to 3 faculty members. I actually just concluded one today that Ayezah has previously taken. Seminars are driven by faculty experience and expertise. They're super flexible. The one we just finished today is based on Yuval Harari's 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. And it gives us an incredible flexibility to be working with students on topics of interest and working with them on, as we refer to it, navigating the modern world, right? A big part of our focus in the upper school and specifically in the 11th and 12th grades is not only helping students get ready for college, but to give them a snapshot of the world they're going into with the caveat that things are changing and they're changing quickly. Upper school seminars are designed as collegiate experiences, right? So this might be, if anyone's familiar with the lecture format in a college that is followed up at points with a precept or a smaller section that gathers to discuss the content, that's what a seminar is. There are a maximum of 3 students, or excuse me, a minimum of 3 students in each upper school seminar and a maximum of 6. And that guarantees airtime for all the students who are in those experiences. They function as 7th or 8th courses for each student. They're not connected to our graduation distribution requirements. It truly is opt-in, and that is so incredibly important. This is what the independent curriculum is at its core. Students opting in, students choosing, students practicing, exercising their agency, and becoming more self-directed in their learning. Seminars are intentionally designed in similar format to independent studies. So seminars are 6 weeks in length, and your students are with, up to 5 other peers. Independent studies are taken on by individual students, and those students design, propose, and complete a course of their choice. They're focused on areas that are not currently covered in the EPS curriculum or course offerings, or they may be on a topic that was touched on in a trimester or year-long course, but it's a domain that a student wants to delve more deeply into. So students come to the program for a variety of reasons. In addition to self-directing their learning, the partnership with a faculty mentor is a pretty incredible thing to experience. I know as a faculty mentor, and I know that it's really good preparation for our students to be self-advocates, to lean into their college experience, to already have the muscle memory of interacting with faculty and interacting with professors, And I'd be curious as to whether or not Eliana has had any of those experiences yet, but that's certainly what we hear back from our alumni. Independent studies are 10 weeks in length. I am actually doing meetings right now, workshops with students to review the first drafts of their independent studies, and they will propose next Wednesday for the winter trimester. We have 17 independent studies in process right now, and then we have 12 coming up that are being proposed for this coming winter. They meet weekly. The meetings between mentor and mentee are about 45 minutes. And the most important thing here, and this is actually a little selfish, is that the student drives the curriculum. So oftentimes, like if I do an independent study with someone in cognitive science or in economics, I'm actually taking 45 minutes possibly to learn some things I don't know yet. And benefit from the students' design and their research. So, Ms. Miller, that may have been a little bit longer than you were hoping for, but in a nutshell, these two experiences are meant to help students know what it means to be in seminar in a collegiate environment and to be able to structure their time, structure their experience in the context of an environment they haven't been in. In the teaching business, we talk about scaffolding things. Eliana, I'm guessing you're not seeing 25 different assignments in a learning management system for a class. You may be seeing 2 or 3, and it's your job to figure out what those are and to navigate those. So again, it's that pre-collegiate experience, and it's the strong connection in both of these experiences between the EPS faculty and EPS 10th, 11th, and 12th graders in seminars, and 11th and 12th graders in independent studies.
Well, Matt, I super appreciate that framing. And what I'm hoping that we can do is actually root this and ground this to the experiences of both Eliana and Ayezah. So what I'm going to do is actually present to you all so that you can see out there a visual of what those different experiences have been that these students have engaged in. So Eliana, I'm hoping you can kick us off with just an introduction to delve into these a little bit more, because we've got some great titles here and I'm excited by all the words I'm seeing. But if you could give us a brief synopsis of some of the experiences that you had in each of these areas, feel free to start with and go in the order that they're presented here. Thank you, Mr. Delaney, for compiling all of this information, or go in any particular order that feels relevant to how you experience them at EPS. But if you can just give us some windows into what some of these different independent curriculum experiences were that you had.
Sure, yeah. I am going to go ahead and start with the seminar experience that I had. A lot of them, when I was looking at the seminars that were offered, were rooted in interests that I had that was diving a little bit deeper into areas and topic areas that I was really interested in. And a big piece of that was social justice. And so some of it was 2 of the seminars that I took. One was on masculinity, and then the other one was on Indigenous culture and, you know, modern and current events on that. And that was a really interesting classroom setup. I'd never been in a space where it was me and like 4 other students and we were talking to our teacher, and it felt very discussion based. I mean, it was very much, okay, we read something together, now let's talk about it. It felt very student driven. And for both of those classes, at the end, it was, okay, you've learned all this information, now do some sort of project, present something, show how you learned. And so I had never really thought of things like that. So that was very interesting, but it translated really well as I was going into college. One of the classes I'm taking right now has 4 other students in it. And when I was telling my fellow first years, they were like, Eliana, that's crazy. How would you take a class like that? I don't know if I could do it. But I was like, oh no, this is just another classroom at EPS, you know? That was really, I think that definitely did that scaffolding that Delaney was talking about. In fact, it was funny, I think 2 weeks ago, 2 other students were absent in class one day, so it's just 3 of us talking about this book, and the teacher was doing their own thing, so it was just us talking. And so it really just felt like a discussion, as we did in seminars. And then my independent studies, that was something that I'd been having an interest in. I personally want to be a teacher, work in the education realm when I'm older. And then I wanted to pair that with this social justice that I was talking about earlier. And so I kind of wanted to have, for those first independent studies, I wanted to have more of a grounding of, okay, what's the current research and what are people talking about right now in education? And then in the spring, and the winter of my senior year, I went in and jumped into this senior thesis where I was looking at and researching and interviewing people who are working in the field about what does equity and inclusivity look like in schools. And from there, I found out how, you know, teachers and students can play different roles in the classroom, and what a good and, you know, productive and agent-making classroom can look like. And what that has translated for me today is that I'm actually one of the lead facilitators in a student-run class that's going to actually be offered in the spring at my school this year, which was crazy to think. I'm like a freshman in college. Who's giving me all of this power right now? But it was very awesome to see how all of that research and work that I had been doing my senior year in a topic that I was really passionate about was able to easily translate into my college experience, which is what I truly appreciate. And the fact that I could go into, you know, what my interests are, and I was able to say, okay, I'm interested in this text, so let's read it. I'm not interested in this one, let's just pass on that. That's something that I'm able to apply as I'm building this curriculum and the syllabus for this next semester. So all of the independent curriculum at EPS has proven to be so valuable for my first year here in college.
Amazing. It's so great to hear about those direct connections of the experience that you have had not only in smaller classes, but also now this great opportunity to be a student leader as a teacher within just your first year. That's fantastic, and it's great to just know how that connects to your EPS experiences. So Ayezah, you're in the midst of those EPS experiences right now. So can you give us some information about what you've been doing from that independent study and seminars perspective?
Yeah, of course. So I was kind of wanted to start with my first independent study, existentialism, Sartrean existentialism and the categorical imperative. This independent study was kind of my dream to do. After I took, there was a class at EPS called Revolutions in Thought, and it was probably the hardest social science class I've taken at EPS, and probably the most formative. I kind of dipped my toes in philosophy for the first time, and then after that I took Worldviews, Truth and Consequences, which is another is a kind of also this brief dive into philosophy. And then I was so infatuated by that it kind of brought me to the topic of existentialism and Kantian morality. And so it was just I was able to explore questions that classes brought to me, and I was able to find my own text. So I read The Groundworks for the Metaphysics of Morals by Immanuel Kant, and then I read Existentialism is a Humanism by Jean-Paul Sartre. And these books are books that I reference to this day in my classes. So in my junior year, I took American Government, and American Government, and I remember referring to Kant and Sartre time after time in class, this philosophy that I learned and all this this formative experience I had really grounded and developed my knowledge of social science. And the essential question I was really was fascinated by in this independent study was originally the morality of my personal actions and how I should act in relation in different interactions to and the morality of these actions, And what I found like the most fascinating by the end of the study was that my question was completely different. I started one place talking about like the morality of like different actions and specifically like grounded in like Kant's philosophy. And I ended up with questions of existentialism, like on like purpose and if there really is purpose, and just I kind of went on this like whole like kind of on this whole like little like existentialist spiral, which I thought was like the most beautiful thing about this independent study was just how it develops. And that kind of segues into my current one, Sufi poetry and the sociolinguistics of Punjabi. This independent study was is far different than what I imagined it to be, which is again the beauty of the independent curriculum, because it was originally grounded in me going to Pakistan over the summer and actually like conducting qualitative research with like Punjabi linguistic professors, but because of COVID that was not possible. So I was faced with this challenge to try to retailor this like independent curriculum I had planned so meticulously in the spring, like in the span of a week, because I didn't want to get too far behind on the work. So it was just like also again an incredible experience to have to be able to work with my mentor and finding ways to make this independent study work. And I'm in the midst of it right now in the middle of like college apps, and so it actually gives like it's a very like it's a very rewarding class, because I know that I've worked so hard to make it work, and it's happening. I'm in the middle of it, and yeah, I'm very excited to see where it goes.
Awesome. Well, Isa, one thing that you highlighted there that I think is so important is that you had a great plan. You had this amazing plan. It sounds fantastic of the research you were going to do and engage in and where you were going to go, and you had to change it. So I'm hoping that you can kick us off with an example of something from this whole experience of, it could be EPS in general, but especially engaging in the independent curriculum where you really what was the work that you needed to do in order to transform a plan A into a plan B or even a plan C around some work that you did. So I'm hoping you can root us a little bit more in some specifics of kind of what that process is like, transforming something that you have an initial intention for and then need to pick up the pieces and figure out something new. Talk more about that.
Yeah, of course. So essentially what me and my mentor did on that first week back, like our first official week of school, was we sat down and we kind of made a map. We were like, there are many moving parts to my original independent study. There was the poetry, and there was analysis of like the craft of the poetry, and then there was like a sociolinguistic study on the language that actually that this poetry was in. And then this underlying thing within all of that, this overarching theme was Sufism, which is like kind of a not very sect, but a component of like the Islamic religion. And so I knew the one thing that was really important to me in this independent study that we established in this week was the theme of Sufism. That was like the core thing that I needed to keep. That was the base of everything. And then poetry, it was very important to the study as that was my creative writing as my intended major in college. So I knew that was something that was really important to me. And now like it's as we actually physically mapped this out. We like drew out like different levels, and like we made like little like these like mind maps of like everything that needs to go into the study. And what we were having the most trouble with at that point was figuring out how I can figure in a sociolinguistic study without having this clear access to like professors and like actual like Punjabi people, like the Punjabi community that I would have been surrounded with in Pakistan. So then knowing that, we kind of narrowed down on something that will most likely have to be dropped or at least altered in this independent study. So when we narrowed that down, we figured out, okay, how can we still keep a little bit of this like theme of like the Punjabi language, but make it so that it's possible at EPS, like in Kirkland, Washington, not all the way across the world. And what I landed on was still conducting qualitative research, but doing it within the local Muslim community and focusing more on how Sufism itself affects local communities and how Sufi poetry reaches that local community. So I still have the aspect of talking to my Punjabi father about the language, but then I'm still able to conduct like qualitative research. It's just that now it's no longer all centered around the language. It's more like I found a way to like diverge those two things into like different ways, but I'm still like staying authentic to what I attended, just in a fairly different way.
Hey, Ms. Miller, can you leave Ayezah up on the screen? But can I take care of some business here?
Go right ahead.
All right, I've got an email from you from the 17th. So first, Ayezah, my apologies for not getting back to you more quickly. That's not my practice. Yes, we can change the title of your independent study on your transcript to Sufis of the subcontinent. And I will say that this is not the first time I've been asked to change the name of an independent study. And some of our best independent studies, when students present at the end of them, they often say something like this, which is akin, Ayezah, to what you just said. They said, when I started this independent study, this was the question I thought I was going to answer. And now that I've done my independent study, this was the question that I was answering. And that speaks to the fact that independent research is organic, right? And it is going down rabbit holes and reaching dead ends and then coming back up for them and developing that ability to work with ambiguity and then reframe and refocus and then arrive, like, and in a collaborative sense, as you're talking about your mentor, Ayezah, on a new path, right? That is, you know, it is the result of all you've done. And then just one other note, Ayezah had the opportunity in her independent study, which she spoke so eloquently about, that was focused on existentialism, of working with our head of school, who's got a PhD in philosophy, Terry Macaluso. And that's not how all schools work, right? Ayezah said, I really want to work with Dr. Macaluso. And I said, go ask her. And she did, and it happened. And to have that kind of intergenerational, like, pattern of thought and leadership and strength. You know, Ayezah, that we're in a school where we have a head of school who's female. And I think that's a big part of why our school feels different than a lot of others. And so I'm just really happy that both you and Eliana are able to bring your ethos into other institutions and other places and to be able to influence them in a positive way. Thanks, Ms. Miller. That's like, if we could do more meetings where I could just have people at them that I needed to talk to and respond to, that would be outstanding.
We build it as a community panel, but actually this is Delaney's office hours, just so everyone knows.
As my friend Patrick would say, then we've killed two rocks with a stone.
Oh, Ayezah, anything that you want to say in response to what Delaney just shared?
I just want to say thank you for approving my new title. I just want to add on that, like, the experience of working with Dr. Macaluso is probably the highlight of my high school career. She actually inspired me to like go directly on like a PhD track for philosophy. And yeah, it's just been, I was actually taken aback when I first emailed. I emailed my advisor first, and then he was like, talk to Mr. Delaney. I was like, okay, I'll talk to Mr. Delaney. I'm not sure if this is gonna work. And then I got connected with Dr. Macaluso, and I wasn't really expecting it, but the amount of like the conversations I had with Dr. Macaluso, I guess just that experience would not have been the same like anywhere else. And it's probably one of the most influential experiences I had at EPS so far. Was being able to write like a proper, like a very extensive academic paper and have Dr. Macaluso directly write comments on it and be able to like present that to a bunch of people and like feel like I felt very accomplished, which is probably also like one of the best outcomes, is that when you present, you come to this realization that, wow, like I built this project and like this whole project proposal, and I actually like did the whole thing for 10 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Incredible. Well, thank you so much for reflecting those experiences, or, you know, just sharing more about them. Eliana, I'd love to hear from you about maybe these moments of transformation between what you had previously envisioned and what something became in the independent curriculum for you. And then feel free, if you have any of your own Dr. Macaluso moments that you want to share as well, feel free to add those on too.
Yeah, I think going into all of my independent studies, I was kind of having the mindset of, I'm going to be this background observer. I'm going to observe how I was working a lot with Mr. Winkleman, who works in the middle school, and Mr. Vandell, who works in the upper school. This kind of background observer, kind of learn from them, write my own writing in response to that. But then they really pushed me to, Eliana, just have your final project be teaching a class, or structure and create a syllabus of an actual class that you might teach. And so I really was not expecting my studies to turn into, okay, if you actually had to put this into practice, what would you do? And so I think that piece there was the transformative piece for me, as I kind of was talking about, where I think it's one thing to study what other people have done and respond to, oh, this was interesting, oh, this might be cool. And it's another thing to actually, you know, almost put money where your mouth is and actually put those things on paper and play it out and see, okay, what worked well, what didn't work well, you know, actually get to have that firsthand practice there. And what was really special in my time working with Mr. Winkleman was that he actually let me have a peek into what he does when he's creating his own syllabus and he's teaching his own classes. And he was kind enough to show, you know, okay, this was my plan that I had today, kind of went sideways. You know, the students, they were really energetic today, so I kind of shifted this way, or they were really quiet today, so we did some more writing and personal reflection. And so those small insights there that I would have otherwise not gotten from just reading a book or reading someone else's research is really what prepped me for this final class that I taught for one of my independent studies, where one, it was virtual, so I think that's going to be a little bit different. I don't think any teacher was prepared for that. But I got to have some practice there of, okay, this is live. Like if I mess up, I mess up, and we just have to keep rolling with it. You know, there's actually going to be a bunch of different personalities in the room. You know, I've read a lot about, okay, you have people from different backgrounds, different experience levels. How do you get everyone on the same, you know, understanding? And I actually got to play with that, which was super interesting. And I got actually some teachers into my class that I was teaching there, which was really fun. I really appreciated them for doing that. But yeah, all of that translated into, you know, this student-led class that I'm helping plan now, where we have a professor advising us, but she's very much just like, do what you want, and I'll just make sure that it gets on your transcript, you know? And so, you know, being able to work with that has been amazing. Being able to say, hey, I've actually helped teach a class before. This usually works this way, but let's try it this way. Or here's what we're hoping might happen, but we got to be prepared for this situation. So that was really amazing. And to go off of what Aiza was talking about with working with Dr. Macaluso, I actually took her philosophy class, I think my junior year, which I don't know how many people can say they took a class where their head of school was their teacher, or was their teacher, yeah, which was absolutely crazy. I'd never been to the 4th floor of the tally before that time, so yeah, that was amazing. And again, to get her feedback on some writing that I actually did was amazing. And so that's again one thing, and I think you mentioned this, Ms. Miller, earlier, of this experience of not being afraid to go and talk to your teachers and having this almost like co-learning experience with your teachers. It definitely has translated well into college. I've been in group sessions where we've been struggling. I don't know how to do this assignment. What do we do? I'm like, let's just go talk to our professor. Let's go to their office hours. Let's go leading the charge in there. So yeah, this working with teachers in independent study, and also in classrooms as well, really helped me realizing the teachers are there to be there for you and help you learn. So
that reminded me, Eliana, that you actually came and interviewed me, I think as part of what you were doing, maybe was it Dr. Macaluso's class? Yeah,
there was.
Interviewed me, and you were just like, popped down to the admissions office, and we chatted with one another, and you're like, I can't believe I did this as part of class. And I was like, this is the highlight of my day for sure. So just thinking about how those connections are forged is really powerful. We received a question about, do students do internship type of work for these projects? So I think Eliana just highlighted, having that student teaching type of internship mode. But Delaney, I'm wondering if you can give us some additional examples of where students have done some immersive experiences in the independent curriculum, maybe that have involved folks outside of the EPS community.
Okay. And in the context of my response, I'm going to both, compliment and thank Eliana for a number of things. In our academic design process, it's very iterative, and I think you've heard that from both Eliana and Ayezah tonight, that we are, to a degree, figuring out things as we go along, and that's hard to do. Like, we could just draw a box around something and say, this is how we do it, and this is how we've always done it, but we're constantly seeking to improve our program and to be responsive to our students. And in thinking about Eliana and Ayezah, you're gonna every time we do a new senior thesis, right? It was Eliana, you were with Kenneth, right? And we have the opportunity to iterate and improve our program, and that is very much informed by the experience the students are having. So the first thing I want to say is, Eliana, thank you for how you helped us refine the senior thesis process. Ayezah will benefit from that. Ayezah, am I correct that I see reference to somewhere to you planning on doing a senior thesis this year?
Yes, either a senior thesis or an independent study in the spring. Okay,
outstanding. So you're going to benefit from Eliana's work and the collaboration she did with us, and you're going to contribute to how the senior thesis evolves in future years for other students, right? So you can come back as an alum, and we can buy you lunch and sit down and hear how you're doing, and thank you. The other piece is this: there's a lot of work going on in the diversity, equity, and inclusion realm right now, and it should be in the United States and in the world. And as a white male coming from privilege, which is, I guess, always what I'll be, I wanted to thank Eliana for me as an individual and for the school as an institution for pursuing her independent study and then later senior thesis in terms of comprehensive equity in schools. It wasn't, Eliana spoke of the freedom and the power she had in it. It also was the impact of her engaging this research. And there are two things I want to point out. Number one, Eliana, with her mentor, pursued not just people in education, but she pursued college professors and other professionals. Like, I think it was, Eliana, was it 5 or 6 different folks you talked to during the course of those last 2 terms?
Yeah, it was 6. It was 6 people. Yeah.
Okay. So to have that access to the world and that freedom to go do that, right? That's a model for other students coming into this space. And then the other piece is this, there's a concept in the academy, right, in the United States and in Europe specifically, that says that, academic work has to be objective and it has to be at a distance. And I appreciate that. I really do. And I think you can get to a point of being pretty objective. And Eliana, when you said, I want to do this academic paper, but I want to pull in some narrative, like some of my diary reflection, some of the experiences I've had as a student in the American educational system at Eastside Prep. Like, I want that narrative to be there so that the foundation of what I'm coming from is clear. And so your ability to bring your personal experience into your academic work, again, the word model keeps popping up, is an incredible model for others. And you've made an incredible contribution to the evolution of like DEI work at EPS, and we refer to it as equity, inclusion, and compassionate leadership. The final thing, Eliana, in the last section of your thesis, you referred to, and you have to correct me if I'm wrong in the way I'm phrasing this, you referred to like the work on equity having the end outcome of Black joy. Do you know how much, like in my work with Ms. McKinney and Dr. Castro, our equity and inclusion coordinators this year, we reference joy? It was like a paradigm shift for us, and it really has had a great influence on how the school is working with these issues, and and maps incredibly well to our vision statement, right? Like, to make a better world. So that is what you leave with us. That is so much of why I was excited to see you tonight, and then the fact that we got to do this kind of reboot because of some of our technical difficulties. So I know I went a little bit long there, but like, that's what I got from Eliana, right? It was she got things from faculty and support, but she also brought things to each of us. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Delaney. It's yeah, I second all of that, especially the emphasis on joy and celebration being part of our equity and inclusion work plan for this year. Seeing those words multiple times in that work plan, I know, Eliana, that's part of your legacy as a student, and it highlights this exchange, that this is not just the independent curriculum is not just about students benefiting from the mentoring of teachers, but this is also about the school benefiting from the research, the intention, and the heart of these students that they put into these projects. So students, I'm wondering if there's any, or Eliana and Ayezah, I should say, alum and student, if there's anything else that you want to highlight just in terms of relationships within the EPS community that really help to create encouragement or incubation for some of these ideas that you had as part of the independent study process. Anything else that you want to highlight in terms of just mentorship in general at EPS that really fueled your experiences within the independent curriculum?
Yeah, I can go ahead and start. I think the best mentors that I had at EPS weren't even the ones that directly gave me any specific advice. It was the ones who threw my questions that I had back at me. It was the ones who, if I had a question for them, they said, okay, how do we go about solving this? They really continuously always put me at the forefront of solving any questions that I had, any issues that we ended up tackling. And so what they gave to me was this feeling of accomplishment at the end of everything that, you know, that we did. I really felt like, you know, every project that I had was something that was mine, and I was able to celebrate it. And they really made me feel like, you know, I had an issue, here's are the steps that I went through doing it. Maybe there were struggles along the way, but you know, at the end, we came up with some sort of project, some sort of final project that I felt really good about. And so that's what I really take away from all of the amazing mentors that I had at EPS, and something that I think that's going to live on with me as I'm going through my college experience right now. I am not looking for, you know, someone else to answer my problems, or it's more about, you know, okay, how do I set myself up for success? I have this question, who can I maybe ask for advice? But at the end of the day, I am this agent for the direction that my life goes. And that's also, again, at the core of what my independent study and my senior thesis was, that really changed and shaped the way that I view education and what education should be. It should be, you know, taking the experiences that the student has and saying, okay, what have you learned in the past? What do you hope to learn? Now, how can you be an agent for change and for success in your own future? So that's what the mentors at EPS that I had taught me the best.
It makes me excited to think about the experiences that your students, both in this upcoming term at college and in the future, are going to have with you as an educator when I hear you frame it that way, because I'm very inspired by that. Ayezah, what would you share in terms of mentorship and the different versions that that's taken for you as an EPS community member?
One of the most, the most influential and prominent things that experiences I've had with my mentors for my independent studies has been them challenging my work. I remember Dr. Macaluso reading I would do analyses of each section I read of Kant, and I remember her challenging. She's like, "Oh, why do you think this?" When I she actively pushed back of okay, making me think very critically. Think critically, EPS motto. But yeah, actually, it's very true. And now I'm working with Mr. Lin, who is one of our an English teacher for the upper school. He every time I bring something, I'm currently making a podcast for my independent study, he is very, very critical. He's like, so why are you framing it this way? He asked me so many questions, and it forces me to really think, why am I doing this? And it has been so important, because I also think it's both provided me guidance, but also has, I don't know how to frame that. Because as Eliana says, I'm still I have power over my independent study, and I am a free agent, but it's honestly very you get taken very seriously, and I think that is the beauty of the independent study, is that I am being talked to almost at times as a peer, arguing almost as you do in a class, back and forth, and just having a very deep discussion on the path of this independent study and the content itself, which has been very important for all the independent studies I've done, and I've learned so much from that, those relationships with my mentors.
The word that came to mind for me as you were grappling with that, Ayezah, was collaborative, which is a word I use a lot and that we use a lot at EPS when talking about the way that we do education here. But having that sense of having a collaborator, whether that's an age peer or in that mentorship that can come with work with a faculty member, I think that's really the goal for all of our relationships and what they can lead to in terms of the process and the outcomes. Mr. Delaney, I think you wanted to loop back to the internships piece that we got the question about specifically. So what would you like to share regarding ways that our students are partnering? We've talked about these great on-campus partnerships and talked about this mentorship here, but those relationships outside of the EPS community as well.
Well, I'll tell you, we've been working on some stats just as a retrospective to look at the evolution of the independent curriculum over time. And I'm gonna focus. It just struck me. I've got this data in front of me, and it just struck me that, like, if I look at, we've heard about, I could go into more detail, but Eliana, right, for example, worked with and connected with one of Mr. Bandel's mentors at Purdue, right? I think, interestingly, when we were remote, it was like we were far more likely to lean into finding a connection. And honestly, during quarantine, there were adults of certain expertise out there who are also really thirsty for connection. And I think that worked out incredibly well. But I want to take you through some of the experiences that students have, just so you've got some more concrete examples of how EPS students get connected to people outside the school. And one caveat on the internship piece. In many schools, students are connected to an internship, and then whatever it is just happens, right? Where students can do some amazing work, and there are other students who may end up making photocopies for the dentist. Right. And that's when you hear Eliana and Ayezah speak, they directed it. And so what happens is that we help them, and they pursue people who are, to a degree, essential to the subject matter they're working on. So I'll take you through some things, and I apologize. I've been having a hard time pronouncing a lot of these terms for a number of years, but I'm going to do my best. Our first two senior theses, we have, I don't know if Thomas is up here, but I'll look for it. Optogenetics and saccadic adaptions in primates.
Mm-hmm.
So the student, Maya Johnson, who took that on, we had to, well, first of all, she was able to pursue a connection with some folks at the Hutch, and then some folks at UW. And one of the challenges with internships, especially in labs, is that students have to be 18 to complete that, to even be able to really ask for an experience. So we worked with Maya to arrange her schedule so that when she did turn 18, right, and she'd done all this independent work, that her schedule was such that she could attend to the work that she was doing at UW with a professor, and not just with a human, but with the primates that they were doing research with. Thomas Schaefer took on randomness and financial statistics, which was a brilliant thesis. And I had the pleasure of working with him through four independent studies and his senior thesis. And he worked with, he had a connection that got him connected to Dan Ariely, who wrote, what is it? Predictably Irrational, who was a professor at Harvard and a professor at Duke. So had direct connection with an expert in that realm. Jackson Fellows took on machine learning and cytomegalovirus prediction, right? Also connected to folks in the field. Kenneth Yang last year with Eliana did a senior thesis, and our Jonathan Briggs, our director of strategy, technology, and innovation, said, let's see if he was working on render engines and ERPT and things like light options and computer graphics and accelerating computing with GPUs. And Mr. Briggs said, why don't we get in touch with the guy who invented this? And so he had a co-mentor along with Mr. Briggs, who had basically invented this technology, and he sat in on Kenneth's final presentation and reflected a bit on what Kenneth had, in what domains Kenneth had pushed him in to really explain what he knew and understood. So those are just some, oh, and one other piece. We had a student years back, Chris Gamel, who was incredibly interested in aviation and is a pilot now, and had a connection to, we had a connection in our community to a former CEO at Microsoft, and who had been doing a ton of work at Boeing. And so he was able to connect with some folks at Boeing and have access to an industry that a lot of people don't get access to. And I'm not saying this just to, you know, kind of blow our trumpet. It just is like the research the students are doing is so organic and so vital that often they just arrive at these connections with people who it makes sense to be connected to.
That's wonderful. I know that Ayezah, we might be losing in just a couple moments due to low power on the generator. Ayezah, if we do still have you with us, is there anything that you'd like to say as we begin to wrap up? And then Eliana, I know that you wanted to chime in as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, reiterate how incredible the independent curriculum at EPS has been, and how formative it is for like what I'm doing, like who basically my development over the past 4 years, and who I want to be, like, going into college. I did say that it's probably had the greatest impact on, like, my ambitions, like my intended majors, and what work I want to do even after that, and just to have the opportunity. It's a very special opportunity, and that isn't available everywhere. It's very special to, like, our community, and the connections you're able to make, like, to your mentors, and to as like Mr. Delaney was talking about, like, people outside, like actual professionals too, that you're able to be connected with. Is such an incredible experience, and is one of my favorite things about EPS.
Yay. Well, I cannot wait to be an attendee at your presentations this year. Ayezah, thank you so much for being here this evening. And Eliana, what did you hope to add in terms of what Mr. Delaney was sharing?
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly add, Delaney was mentioning my work with professors in the field. And so I just wanted to mention that through my connections with one of those professors, she had actually recommended me for a job over this last summer with a school that was starting up a new program that was lowering the achievement gap in education. And so I was going up against basically, like, juniors and seniors in college, so I was not expecting to get this job. But with that recommendation that I had with that connection, and she had seen my work that I had been doing, I was able to discuss and talk with the interviewer about, what work and experience I had in learning about education and the fundamentals of education, which led me to actually end up getting that job, which is effectively a TA job over this past summer. So I think the things that I've been learning and I've been directing myself in through this independent study has been applicable to jobs that I've been applying for and will continue to apply to. And so that's just one thing I really wanted to add, that I appreciate that I was able to actually specialize in something that I know I want to put on, like, my resume, for example, in future jobs that I would be applying for.
Thinking about a resume that doesn't begin at that, end of college time, and, sort of that's the punctuation mark for here's where all the stuff that you really care about begins. But knowing that those experiences began for you at EPS, Eliana, is so exciting to hear. And I'm just so eager to continue to be in touch and hear about the things that you share. And I just want to highlight for folks, the reason why Eliana joined us for this panel is because she came back to campus recently, and I had a chance to see her in person say, would you like to join us for this opportunity? It's not because we, are hand-picking students in a way where she would be the only student who would have wonderful superlative things to share about her own experiences, but it's because she's still an engaged member of our community who happened to come back for a break recently. And Eliana, like all of our alumni, enjoy free food when they're on campus, as well as the company of
taking
their
advantage of the cookies. I took all the cookies.
The desserts are great, the food's great. So it's a reason why our alums stay connected to us. But I think that the sense of connection that they have, the sense of relationship that they have, is probably outweighing maybe the cookies in the Levenger Pool Commons, which you see pictured behind us this evening. So maybe that's why we all chose it as our backgrounds in celebration of that. So Eliana, it was great to see you in this virtual way this evening, and we cannot wait to hear more about what you will continue to experience as a college student at Swarthmore, with upcoming, again, these teaching experiences that you've been able to engage in, and just seeing you continue to be an active member of the EPS community as an alum is something that brings us a tremendous amount of joy. So thank you, Mr. Delaney. Thank you for all of the things that you shared in terms of framing what the independent curriculum is all about at EPS, and some great examples of not only our panelists, but other students and the ways that they've engaged in their research and their work. I just want to highlight that courses.eastsideprep.org is a great place to be able to see course descriptions of all of our seminars, as well as many other courses that are part of the upper school and middle school curricula. And that when you visit the admissions page, you'll be able to see EPS and Introduction, which is going to give you an overview of some of these experiences, along with a full list of our seminar opportunities. So we invite you to use those resources, to be in touch with us as you have more questions about our program. And we will look forward to certainly having more conversations along these lines. So we have continued community panels as we go through this admissions season. And we invite you to look those up on Ravenna, register for those experiences in Ravenna, because that's a great way to be able to stay connected to these organic conversations from our community and give you insights into how you could see yourself as a part of it as well. So thanks everyone. Thanks to Meg Bleiler again for producing this event as our admissions events coordinator, and we will see you all again very soon. Have a great evening.